Welcome to Garden Valley Church Podcasts. We are so looking forward to having you join us today.
Welcome to Wow, Look at Us Now podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Oneslager.
And I'm Michael Oneslager. Welcome, guys, to Wow, Look at Us Now podcast.
It's going to be funny because it's just your voice for most of it. Obviously, it's a podcast.
Yeah.
If they actually watch the video, they'll be able to see what we do before.
If they don't, they'll just hear there's like long, awkward pause and then... Anyways. Today's subject is talking about encountering God.
Basically, testimonies, actually, is what we're going to...
Well,
yeah.
Our encounters with God.
Well, yeah, but that's what I mean. I actually think it sounds better than testimonies. I like saying encountering God because everyone's...
Because that's what it is. The testimony is you just talking about how you encountered him.
Yeah. So let's start. How about, because I got a couple. So you want me to start with one, and you only have one, and I have another one?
Yeah, this episode, your show, man. I didn't have
Encountering
a lot.
God.
I already shared a bunch on the last episode.
Like,
so.
oh, I don't have a whole bunch. I'm like, dude, I couldn't even. These are
Well,
only two that I'm like, how do I narrow it down?
I do have a bunch. Like, I've encountered God, but I've already shared, like, on the last episode quite a bit.
Oh,
so.
no, actually, I encountered God more, but... I have a whole journal full, yo.
You're like, how many do you have? I'm like,
know.
10. You're like, I got 11.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine. So let's start. Which one should I start with? The day I surrendered my life with the dreams kind of stuff, or should I do the vision that I had?
Are we going to bounce back and forth, or are you just...
Yeah, I'm going to do one. You can do yours, and then I'll do the last one.
Do the first one that's on the list. On your list, the first one.
Oh, okay. So let's get started. It's a long one, I feel like, and I'm gonna try to make this as short as possible. So this is before. So September 17th, 2017 was the day I actually like surrendered my life to God. So let's backtrack a little bit. With obviously my whole life, God was always there, in every single encounter and just throughout my life. But one, I didn't know that then, but when I look back, I'm like, he was obviously there the whole time. I feel like I had to say that.
We're already at the end. You're like, oh, well.
No, just in case for the fact checkers, you know.
Okay.
So we're just backtracking to 2 months, I think, before that, whatever it was. So let's say fair time. So that's August, right?
Yeah.
Wait, this is all in August and September, I guess. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter, but around fair time, I just remember it was fair time because that was when we were living in a fifth wheel then. Not you and me and someone else. But we were living in a fifth wheel because we were going to like build a house and stuff. But I had this dream. Okay. Also, my parents are pastors, so I mean, it's not anything unusual to me, but similar. So I had this dream, and I just remember it was about the rapture. And so this dream was about, and I knew it was like a God-given one. Like it was so real, and it like spoke to straight to my soul. Like I literally woke up crying after this dream. And I knew it was real. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't fake. I just have never experienced anything like that. Like I dreamed like that before. So I had this dream. It was me like standing there, and all of a sudden it was God was like coming down from the sky, and in the clouds, and everyone was like looking up at the sky and knew who it was. And everyone was like, even people that obviously didn't believe in God or weren't Christians, everyone knew who it was. And they were all just saying like, God, like that's Jesus, like that's Jesus, you know? And you see him like start ascending down, and it's like further away. And so we obviously see, and I even knew who it was. Like, I was like, everyone's spirit was jumping. Like, even those that didn't believe, even those that, like even me, even though I knew I wasn't following God at the time. It's like, you just felt this love for him, and you knew like that's who your father was, like that's who he just the king was. So we all seen him go down, like further down, like further out, but we never saw how he went. So everyone's just running that way. Everyone that is around is just run. It's like almost in these mountains, maybe. I couldn't. It's such a weird dream, but like in these mountains, when he went down there, we ended up going here, and then there ended up being lines. So there's like the stairwell. We made it to the stairwell in the mountains. Who knows? It's so weird. And there was like these rooms, and one went right and one went left, and it was like this going down, and it was into these rooms, and we knew Jesus went in one of them. So we're like, I don't want to say we're, but these random people, we're all like, where did he go? Which one? He went in one of them. So we see people going in both lines. Well, obviously, I'm just following whoever's in front of me. Wow, that's actually prophetic. Like, I'm just thinking about this now of what I was doing in my worldly view. But I was following just who was in front of me. Like, they must know where he's at, because I don't know. And so I just followed them. We took the left stairwell and we went down, and when we got there, it was just this white room. There was nothing. And then we all of a sudden knew that like that he wasn't there, that he took the right side. We took the left side and we didn't take the right side, and we're like, oh no. And so we start all running up. It's like panicking, like knowing like this is not good kind of thing. By the time we got up, everything was gone. Like we knew that we were left behind, and that we were too late. And so right after that, it was like another like scene of it. And it was like after the rapture. So after the people were still there that were left behind, it was like this crazy, chaotic, I can't even explain it. I can't, in words, you really can't explain about how it felt. It was like the nastiest, like lusty, sexual, dirty, perverted, not even that, and like this fear over you. And I was like, it was just like this other section of the dream, and it was we were in this laundry mat doing our laundry, no idea why, but it was just like me and this girl, and there's like these big guys, and everywhere you go there was like these big giant guys that like, it was like you thought they were like the mafia or something. Like you knew they were just in charge, like they took dominion over you in a way, but they were really disgusting, and that's the feeling you got. But they just had like these big like guns and stuff, and there's just one guy that's like a littler guy, he's in charge, and the bigger one's next to them. And when we're in there, me and a girl are just in our laundromat, and they're just standing there with the guns. Everyone's there. It's like you're being controlled. You're being like, you have no say, no choice in what you're doing. But we're just like trying to live our lives, putting our laundry in, and all of a sudden, I just see the girl right next to me get shot down, like, and she just falls in ground. And I like look at her, and I'm like, what the heck? And I go next to her, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, why would you do that? And I was like yelling at those guys, like, knowing me. And they're like, because there's no rules. And the way they said it, and then it was just like the dream was done. It was a gross, like, I can't even explain. I'm guessing that's going to be like how hell is, or after the rapture. That's all I can think of. It's like hell on earth. Like, I can't even explain it. Anyways, woke up. I was like hysterically crying, texting my sisters and my family, because I was like, wow, I've never had a dream like this. This was so real. Like, I literally got left behind because of my life. I knew I wasn't doing the right thing, what I should be doing, and I knew the call that God was calling me to, but I didn't, I didn't listen. So within a couple weeks of that, I went over to, I kind of like, it stuck with me, but I kind of just like forgot about it. I was like, like putting that off. And then I went to the Brownsville Music Country Festival a couple weeks after that, and I went with the girls. We had a girls trip. It was great and all, but there was one part where I was drunk like literally every night. Nah, I wasn't. It was like the first 2 nights, but either way, I just remember so clearly. I lost my friends. I was trying to get a water or something at the end of it, and we had no cell service, and it was like one of the first couple nights there, and so I had no idea where our camp was really because it was far out. People been there, they know. And I lost them, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go back to the campsite because eventually they're gonna have to come back there. You know, like I just know that's a good meeting spot. I'm not gonna try to find them in those huge crowds, like leaving and everything. And I was by myself, and I just remember walking back and like actually kind of like praying to God and being like, God, you're gonna have to protect me, like. Even though I'm drunk out of my mind, you're gonna have to protect me. Like, I don't know. Like, and then kind of like sobered up, to be honest, like when you start getting in that mode. But it was really weird. I felt like you're going past these guys' camps, and there was like a guys' trips too, obviously everywhere. There's tons of people, but there was like a certain camp I remember going by, and it just felt disgusting, like very like eerie. And honestly, I thought I might get raped that night. Like I really was like, this is actually not a good idea. And so I just remember being there afterwards, you know, like, and then people are over at our camp going back and forth. And just that night, I just specifically heard God say, Rochelle, this is not who you are. And I was just like, what? Like, I was just like you knew it wasn't your voice. And sometimes, you know, when you like hear God, you decipher whether, no, like it was straight, like it was like spoken in me saying, Rochelle, this is not who you are. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, let's stop that. So that was just like one of the many things that happened during a trip like that and later on. But so it was obviously, so that was in August. So in September, you know, 17th, I was going to break up with my fiance at that time. I just knew, like, and so the night before that, I just knew that I needed to do it because I was like, obviously, I didn't know too much. I obviously knew religion and stuff, but all I know is I was gonna have to give up a lot to follow God, and I knew like the person that I was with that I was going to have to. I was gonna have to either get married to him or, you know, break it off because I didn't want to live with him before I knew that we weren't gonna be able to stay. Well, I mean, I did next time go around, but I didn't think that I would be able to stop myself from like having sex before marriage, you know, and like going backwards after we already did that and lived together and stuff. So, this was on a Saturday night, and so I was like, yep, I'm just gonna have to do it. So I was like, you know, crying myself to sleep. Obviously, at that time, my fiance, he was sleeping and turned around, but I was literally laying there and like very quietly. I wasn't like hysterically crying, but there's like tears falling, and knew like, okay, like I'm gonna do this for you, God. Like I'm serious about it. So Sunday came around and I was like, after church, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna have to move my child out. Like I'm gonna have to do all this stuff. It's gonna be hard, but it's gonna be worth it, you know, that kind of stuff. So by Sunday, it's at my parents' church. We end up having this speaker that I actually grew up with him, in which him and his wife are now pastors in California. But they were coming from California. They asked, or my dad, I don't know if he asked or if they asked to come speak, but he did say he was going to already speak somewhere else. So he ended up coming to church. We had this great sermon about like stepping out in faith. And actually, I could relate to it a lot because that's what I was about to do. I was like, wow, that spoke to me so much. And so at the very end, he's like, I actually have the pastor, his name's Eric. He's like, I have 3 people I need to pray for. He's like, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be for here or if it's supposed to be for, you know, my other church I'm supposed to speak out in a couple hours. So this is just what I'm getting. So if it relates to you, you know, like try to respond if you want, you know, if you're comfortable or whatever. And so he said, the first person I have, and mind you, this was a long time ago, so Brax was little, but he's like, the first person all I keep hearing is someone that just really enjoys Happy Meals. And And we were all standing there, and the first thought was like Braxton. I'm like, oh, it was Happy Meals for sure, because that kid, he's a hunk. And when he was little, his favorite places were sushi, because he loved eating sushi all the time. He's funny at 3 years old, but he that's where we ate all the time. But he liked McDonald's too, because I wouldn't ever really let him have it, and he would with grandma too, but I would like randomly do it once in a while. And so he loved having Happy Meals because they came with a toy, and I was like, oh. So as soon as he said that, I was like, oh man, that's Braxton. And I was like, no. He's like, I don't really know what else to say. I just can keep telling you that this kid, and it's, or he said, I don't know if he said kid or not, he might have said, but this, the describing it, just really loves him. And I was like, okay. So I'm like, oh, I think it's Braxton, I'm pretty sure. And so he had him come up. He was downstairs at the kids' church, and we had him come up, and he prayed for him, and he just spoke like this. Like, I still have a video of it, actually, of him speaking stuff over him, and it was just so awesome to see. And, you know, so then he goes back down, and then he's like, okay, I have another person. He's like going back and forth, like pacing, because he's like being quiet, like
He's
listening. Yeah.
Listening to God.
Yeah, he's listening. So he's just like pacing back and forth and like listening. And he's like, okay. He's like, this person has had a dream their entire lives, but every time that God has brought it up to them, they just keep saying like, no, another time, like, come back later. Come back later with it. Like, we'll talk about it later. And I'm like sitting in the back, and I'm like, of course, I can think. I'm sitting in the back, and I'm like, wait. And it sounds so crazy to think about now because of how I said it. Like, when I look back, he was like, said something, or I'm sitting there. Shoot, I'm gonna mess it up now. How did I say that? Do you remember what part of the story it is? Either way. He said something. Oh, yeah. So I was thinking in my head, right when he said part of it, I was like, shoot, I didn't get to hear all that. I was like distracted about something. I was like, I wish he would just repeat it because I didn't get to hear him. I'm saying this in my head. And then he's like, okay, I'm actually going to repeat myself because I don't think you heard me. You think that would be the first thing that would be like, oh my gosh. But no, just me being like, oh, he's going to say it again. Yay, like, lucky me. It's so crazy now, but he ended up repeating it and saying like, and I was just like, like, well, I wanted to be a police officer my entire life. And I was like, I don't know if that's like what he's necessarily talking about. Like, that doesn't resonate. I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like, that, I don't think that resonates with me. He's like, starts pacing back and forth. He's like, okay. He's like, well, now I know this person's name. And so I'm in the back with my sisters and be like, yeah, I'm like, call him out. We want to know, that kind of stuff. And he was like, well, but God told me not to call him out because he's a gentleman and it's their choice to respond. He's like, okay. And he's like, now that I know this person's name, he's like, this person just cried themselves to sleep last night. And I was like, what? Like, I can't even explain it. I've never, I never thought that like God really seen me. I never thought that he like really, like, I was important. I was like, no, there's way other people, way more like more important people to really deal with. And I had some issues, but I was like, oh, you can go deal with someone else. Like, I'm not that important, that kind of stuff. And so that was the first time that I really knew that he was like directly speaking to me. It was like this hot light pressing on my chest, and I was like, oh shoot, that's me. I was like, wow, that's really actually probably the first time that I ever knew that God was real to me. Like, I knew he was real, but that just like defined it right there. And I went up there, and I just remember being like, what, he was praying over me, and him and his wife came up, and they just start saying all this stuff when I'm praying, stuff I've never said to anyone in my life. It was just stuff that I always thought about myself, like, you're never good enough, you're dumb, you're stupid, whatever it is. And I was just like, what? Like, okay, I wasn't telling people this, like, yeah. So, that just happened. And so I just remember praying and like raising my hands, and in my head, I literally just said, God, okay, if you can fix this mess, if you can fix me as a mess, then I will serve you for the rest of my life. And I meant it with every part of me. And from that day on, my life was literally changed. Like, I've never gone back since. Like, people that knew me before are literally like, you just did a 180. Like, I mean, you're still Rochelle, but it wasn't like how I used to be. And after that, it literally felt like he delivered me from so much. Like, that's the last time that I ever watched porn. Like, that was the last time that I ever, well, I guess that wasn't the last time about, like, cussing, but it really, like, cleaned up my mouth. Like, there was just, like, a bunch of stuff that he just, like, took right then. Some other stuff, it was definitely a process, and it still is, but it just, like, felt like my actual insides were clean. I've never felt that in my entire life, and it's so hard. It makes you feel like you're high on life. Like, you're on cloud nine, like you're literally floating because you're just like, you have this joy. It was like this renewing of my entire body. And I was just like, I never knew that I had weight on my shoulders. I was dirty inside. You know, like you kind of feel like that, but you don't really know until after. And then you're like, wow. So that was number one. We're on to the next. Sorry, I told you it was going to take a long time. That's a real good one.
I would say I definitely go to this is like an encounter with God where I've had many, like, we'll just say that. There's like a lot, and it did different seasons, like some meant more in that season. But one I would say was the turning point for me. So like I've talked multiple times on this podcast about how even though I wasn't like serving God for a certain period of my life, like I knew that I was going to have a turning point and that God was going to use me. Like, I knew that I would come back around, that I just had this feeling, like this gut feeling, like I just knew. I'm like, I'm going to come back into his presence and figure it out, you know, not figure his presence out, but figure my life out and get it back together and stuff and get back into a relationship with him. Well, this is one experience where this happened right before that turnaround. This was like a pivot point. So I'm driving. I lived in Sutherland at the time, and I didn't. I was coming back from Sutherland. Anyways, I'm driving, and there's this certain billboard that like sits out. It's on the straight stretch. It's kind of right by where the stator sits and catches people speeding and stuff. So I'm coming over the hill.
So you can't expose them like that. No, he's lying. No, they're not there. They're not there.
Everybody knows it. Like it's the emergency.
I know. I was
vehicle.
joking. I was joking.
Anyways, I look up.
You're joking.
It's the billboard that's like right next to that. To the left, I was like looking at that billboard, and as I'm driving, I had this like vision. I don't know if anybody in Roseburg has eaten at Denny's, but there's a claw machine at the entrance, and then there's a booth that you can just sit at and wait to be seated. And I'm sitting at this booth, and
this is a vision.
Yeah, this is like a legit vision of what's going on. And I'm driving, and like I'm seeing this like in my head all at once. It was like very like it was crazy to think about.
Don't try this.
Yeah. So I'm sitting at this booth, and I'm turned to my right, and I'm looking at this claw machine, and it's a kind of a packed place. Like I can hear there's noise all the way around, but there's this father that's standing behind the son, and the son is playing the claw machine, and he keeps not getting it. Okay, needs another one, needs another one, needs another one. And this dad is like, he's just got this wad of ones, and he's just feeding the machine. Like, he don't care. Like, and when I was younger, you only got like $2 max. Like, that's all you got. If you can't get something in the $2, sorry about your luck, dude. So like, and that's how it is for a lot of kids. But I mean, like, no parent is just gonna want to feed this machine when it's like a 50-cent toy. After one play, they've already made, Denny's has already made their money. And this dad is just feeding this claw machine. And I was in my head, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, as a dad to do, like, to be able to just, you don't even care about you could go and buy.
You don't care about the cost.
Yeah, you could go and buy a stuffed animal for the amount of money he's throwing in there, like a nice one. And you didn't care. Like, this kid wants this bear. Like, he wants it so stinking bad. And this dad is just feeding it. And in that moment, like, everything just hit. And it was like a prophetic vision. And God was the dad feeding the machine full of ones, and Jesus was the kid at the machine, and I was that 50-cent toy. I was that 50-cent bear. Like in my mind, like I was worthless. Like it didn't even care. Like I'm just stuffed in here with this machine full of other cheap toys that nobody cares about. And you have God, and Jesus is like, I want you. I want you so bad. And God is just facilitating it, and just bam, 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 bam. Like, and those ones became every time he's reached out to me, every time that he's talked to me, every time that he spoke to my heart, every time he's had a prophetic word spoken over my life, every time, like anytime somebody's prayed for me, like all these ones just became prayers and actions and God reaching out. And Jesus is stoked. Like the kid on the machine is just stoked. And it's like Jesus kept fighting for me, like just wanting to get me. Like in that moment, it was about me. And I was crying so hard on the way home. Because in that moment, I felt so loved. I felt so loved. More loved than I probably ever have. Like it was just crazy to me, because it was like I got to see my view, Jesus's view, God's view, worldly view, all at once. Like it was just in this one picture of like my value on myself, but what Jesus and God, how they feel about me, and how it's just like Jesus cares for me so much. Like him coming on to earth and dying on the cross for us, and then you just have God like creating all these opportunities. Like, you want this, like go after it, go. And man, it wrecked me, and that was a turning point for me. That was like I wrote it down. I held on to that. Like things didn't change for me like 180, in that moment. But it was so.
Well, didn't you have like a back and forth? Was this shortly after
we started talking?
It was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or shortly before we started talking.
Yeah, so I met.
Yeah, not after. Shortly before we started talking. So then it was like a couple months before, I would say. Maybe 4 months before. This is right before I got rid of social media. So like that happened, I got rid of social media, like things started happening, and I started to like clean stuff up in my life. But yeah, that was like that was my pivot moment, because I knew, I was like, okay, like, and I didn't even remember driving home. Like I showed up at my driveway. Like I did not remember a single light. I did not remember, like I was legit bawling my eyes out and just seeing this thing like on a big screen happening. It was crazy.
So you were probably really paying attention too, though.
Well, yeah, and like there's people like sleeping on driving on autopilot, like they don't remember things. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
I was so invested in that moment, and it just like
we took the car, we floated home. No idea how we got there.
Yeah, no how we got there. So it was super cool.
You probably were hungover after that, huh? Because actually, when you have encounters with God and like God,
like spiritually hungover, yeah,
like
I sacked out so hard when I got home, but it was just
workout.
It was crazy. It was crazy because it was my pivot moment, and I felt so great, so loved. Like it's just like seeing the dynamic. I was like, wow. Like I hadn't, and I think that was the first point where I really understood that God does talk to me. Mm-hmm. Like he legit talks to me. And
well, in the same, and also like knowing that he was there throughout your whole life.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I was saying.
Oh yeah.
Like you didn't really realize, and you look back and you're like, he really was there the entire time. I just didn't open my eyes and ears to listen or
all the other people, and like that's what I got too out of it, is like all the other people in the world, they wouldn't keep putting ones in there, but God's like, I'm going to. I want you. I'm like, oh.
That's what you did for me. You're like, I want you, and you kept putting those ones in. Just kidding. If you like it, then should have put a ring on it. Okay. Well, okay. We're gonna finish with this one. Man, I wish we should have definitely done this in like 2 episodes, because I feel like if I would have actually got my journal out, I can't even like tell you how many is on there. So when I was a little girl, I'm not gonna say the specifics of this vision that I got like from God, because I don't want people to know, kind of. I don't know. I think it's a private thing. And I think this is like the prophetic thing that God has shown me and like also been spoken over me. I feel like this is for others to find out when it happens. I don't want, because I don't know what it means. I don't know fully what it means, but I'm not going to say, look at me, whatever. But this is like, maybe like I'll try to talk about it as much as I can. But I got this vision. My dad, like my dad always, we traveled and we preached growing up. So I was used to that. That's like how I grew up. Well, anyways, when he was up there, we were at some church in like Albany or and somewhere in that area. When he was on the stage preaching, I don't remember how old I was. I could have been anywhere from like 6 to 10, probably. Anyway, I don't remember. It just has always been in the back of my mind and in my heart. Like I just have always seen it. It just when my dad was up on stage preaching, it like clicked over onto me, and you know something happened and whatever else, which we will soon maybe find out. Anyways, it was like this whole census crazy thing, and it's always stuck with me. So throughout my life, I always was like questioning it. Like it would randomly come up and I would forget about it. Like I remember remembering it, like just being like, oh yeah, God, that's what I want to do. Yeah, like that's God. That's something that's like I could feel like that's something true about me. It seems to fit. I mean, at the time it didn't, but like as I started getting older, and then especially when I gave my life to God, I like knew something like similar, and I totally forgot about it, and then it kept like popping back in my mind, and I was like kept questioning, like, is this like is it only, and I would kept asking God, I meant, is being like, God, is this like a God thing? Or is this just a me thing? Like, is this just something I want? So, and do I want it for the wrong reasons? Is this something, you know, that I'm making up myself just because I want it so bad? So this is maybe what I remember. But I just, you know, kept going back and forth. Well, I think it was last summer. Yeah, it had to have been because we were already married. So, wait, no. Yeah, it was. Okay. So last summer, I was texting one of my friends about, oh, maybe come to this camp thing. It's actually a campground where I grew up, for the first 10 years of my life, we lived on this campground. My parents were the district youth directors. So we were in charge of, you know, when the kids go to like youth camp in the summers, that was us. We had a great time. I loved growing up that way. It was a really good childhood. It was lonely, obviously, during the year, but when summer came around, it was popping. It was fun. God showed up. It was just like a great time. It was literally like a high at summertime. That sounds great, but so there was camp meetings happening last time, and there's specific reasons why I wasn't gonna go, because of like what happened a year or two before, a year ago before that or whatever. It was just like some bad stuff like with my ex involved and stuff, and I just didn't want to like bring up that because I felt like I forgave and like felt, you know, I felt like okay. And I didn't know if it was raw again, or if I was going to bring it up again. Like I felt like I was going to cut ties with, you know, associations and stuff and just like completely drop it. But my parents are still involved with it because that's like the denomination thing that they're involved with. So, and they're on the board or whatever. So they said that they were going. I don't know if my mom was doing worship or not, or what they were doing, but they were just gonna be there for this church service, and it's only, you know, like 30 minutes away from here. So I was thinking about going, and I was talking to my friend about it, and I was like asking her to go with me because I didn't want to go by myself because I just didn't want to have to like think about things and like get it brought up again. Well, she ended up saying like, "Hey, I can't," because it was kind of last minute. It was like within that day. And she had like work the next morning or whatever because we're gonna be out a little bit later. So I ended up being like, okay, well, I'm not gonna go. So I ended up like taking my time. Well, okay, so actually, when I was talking to her earlier that day, I was texting her and I was like, I am starting to think, like, I don't remember what brought it up, but I was like, I'm really starting to think like that this is like a God vision, like a God dream, a God thing. Like it's not just me. Like I think there's a reason why it was put into me. I don't think it's something made up by me. I'm really, you know, thinking it's supposed to be a God thing. And, you know, she agreed, like we talked about it, so on and so forth. So I'm taking my sweet time after I get off work. I'm like, I ain't going. I go get a pedicure. I go stop by Michael's work to go see him. And I was like, yeah, like hanging out. Like I was gonna go read a book or something when I got home. And I just kept feeling like a pressing from God. Like it was like this I'm like, I just knew. I knew he was saying like, come on, like get out of your comfort zone. Come on, like meet me here. And I was like, ugh, I don't want to do it. And I was like, no. And I was like making excuses to God, being like, no, I don't have enough time to get ready. Like I just messed around this whole time. And I'm gonna end up being late. And he was like, that's fine. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever. You know what, screw it. I was like, I don't care. This is like where the part came in where I was like, I actually, like, it doesn't matter what other people think of me in this moment. Like, the only thing that matters is what God says. Like, this has nothing to do, like, I don't care what they say and think about me because I know the truth. Like, I know what really happened. So whether they want to think something else happened, that's on them. Like, they don't really know me and it doesn't matter. So I ended up hurrying up, like, oh man, I probably looked like a train wreck. I mean, other people probably wouldn't say that, but I thought so. So I was just trying to rush. Finally got there. Of course, I'm like, 15 minutes late. I get there in the church. My parents are all the way to the front, and I was like, oh, great. Now I get to walk in front of every single person's going to watch me. I mean, it was worship, but I know that they're going to be looking. So I was like, okay, whatever. I walk down to the front, stand with my parents, go through the thing. There was this speaker. I guess she knew me when she met me when I was a baby, but that was it. She doesn't like know me. And I don't really even remember her name. I think it's like Pauletta or something like that. Anyways, I just knew. I had this feeling before she was even up there. We were still doing worship. I just had a feeling like God's going to call me out. Like he does this stuff. This has happened many times. God's straight up been seeing me in a church, had someone call me out in front of everyone else. So I was like, okay. I so know that he's going to do this. So she goes through the sermon. It was amazing. It was talking about like getting rid of the junk in your life, like decluttering kind of, because you can't sit at like both tables. You can't sit at God's table and you can't sit at Satan's table, like one or the other. You got to choose. And it was just like right what I was going through with in my life because I was taking a break from social media at that time and trying to declutter my life, get all the noise and distractions out of my head and just like taking it day by day. So I was like, wow, that was really good. So at the end, she's praying for people. There's like a huge line all the way down. And she's like probably like 20 minutes, half an hour into it that she's been doing it, and people are still in line waiting to get prayed for. And then she like looks at me, and I'm on the front seat just like watching and like intrigued, but like sitting like this, and she looks at me and she points at me and she's like, come here. And I was like, oh, I knew it, God. Like I almost laughed. I didn't yet, but it was just like that part where I was like, you're funny, God. Like I knew it. Like I always question myself, but I know somehow. And then she turns off the mic and she looked at me because she was praying over the mic, through everyone else. But obviously this was a private conversation because she needs to tell it to everyone else. And she looked at me and she started, she prayed for me for a second. And then she said, honey, can I just tell you that vision you had as a little girl, it's a God dream and it's a God vision. He said it's going to happen. It's his promise to you. And I was like, what the heck? Like literally that day, like probably 6 hours before, texting my other friend saying, I'm really starting to think this is like a God thing and not just a me thing. And there he goes, confirming his word. I'm like, dude, man, I just love Jesus. Honestly, like they're crazy and I love it. I love stuff like that because that is so like, there's no absolute way she would have known that.
Yeah.
So there's nothing else to say. Like, oh no, like she just really sensed it. No. That was a crazy thing. And I was just like, okay. And then it pumped me up. And then she obviously said a lot more stuff after that, but that was just the gist of it. And it was just like a really refreshing. And then, it's funny that we're talking about now because, a year later, now I'm like in a waiting season again, like where things are slowing down a little bit. Not really. I mean, our lives are freaking crazy. But I'm just back being like, oh, are you sure? I'm like, are you sure? I don't even know. Like,
Nothing's happening.
yeah, nothing's happening. I don't see this
Yeah.
coming to light. Like, what, I wonder what it's gonna be. And I'm like, but then I get really pumped too. I'm like, hey God, like, I want my mind to be like blown. I know it's going to be, but I'm just like
You
really
like-
excited for what is to come.
You like
Because
surprises.
yeah, I love surprises.
And he's gonna be like, "Oh, here you go, surprise."
Yeah, I love it. And so I'm ready to see what he has for
Yeah.
me. But like in the same sense, like, I mean, because I've always wanted to do that. Like maybe I wouldn't even say for a job, but that's always what I've wanted. So I'm like, oh, okay,
Like
okay,
traveling, speaking.
maybe, yeah. Anyways, just trying to ruin it, but yeah, I'm kind of excited. We'll see where this goes and what's gonna happen because I honestly have no idea.
Cool. You want to pray us out? No, still no.
No,
Okay.
really. Pray us out.
I just figure this out. We always pray over the people listening after
I
every
know,
episode.
but I'm just thinking, what could we even pray about?
Oh, there's a lot to pray.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to pray
Okay.
for, but about people encountering God. We
Yeah.
did that. Probably the subject,
Exactly.
you know.
That's what I was talking
I
about.
got lost in my stories. Can't remember a thing. Oh.
Still no? Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for a time to come together and talk about our moments with you and share our deep details about how you've encountered us and how much it's impacted our lives. Lord, I ask that you just remind people that are listening right now that have had encounters with you that may have thought that, questioned whether it was them, whether it was you, that you just make it known that it was you, it was you reaching out and you speaking to them. And Lord, anybody's dream that they've had that is of you, Lord, I just ask that you bring it to their memory and show them that it is going to come to fruition and that you are there walking beside them. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in checking out more of our podcasts as they come available, please download our app in your device's app store or check us out on your podcast platform at Garden Valley Church. We look forward to seeing you next time.